Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are wading into, well, what you can only call a corporate battle royal. It's a bidding war that is so complex and so high stakes that it is, right now, actively reshaping the future of American entertainment.
It really is.
We're talking, of course, about Warner Bros., Discovery, WBD. It's this media giant whose just immense collection of assets is now at the center of a massive, and I think we have to say, a fundamentally hostile takeover bid.
It is a genuinely pivotal moment, and not just for Wall Street. You know, when you really look at all the source material we've gathered, it's pretty clear this is a fight for control over the global cultural pipeline.
Right.
This isn't just about balance sheets. It's about who owns the stories that define entire generations. So our mission today is to really unpack this unprecedented rivalry. We need to figure out who the players are, why WBD became such an incredibly important prize, and what the ultimate stakes are for regulators, for creatives, and for you, the person paying the streaming bills every month.
Okay, so let's try and unpack this because the scale here is just immense. We are looking at a battle for a company that the sources are, I think rightly, describing as a bastion of American entertainment.
Yeah, that's not an exaggeration.
WBD is not some, small niche asset waiting to be carved up. This is the home for some of the most influential and profitable IP on the entire planet.
Exactly. The cultural significance alone is just staggering, and that's what gives WBD this tremendous leverage in all these negotiations. I mean, just think about the foundational franchises that are under that one roof. You've got the enduring influence of Harry Potter, which was, a formative cultural event for an entire generation of millennials who are now major consumers.
It's a prime demographic, yeah.
And then you layer on top of that the global phenomenon of Game of Thrones, the entire newly revitalized James Gunn DC Universe slate, and of course, the massive theatrical hit that was Barbie. These things don't just generate revenue, they guarantee cultural relevance for years to come.
And this whole situation has gone from what was supposed to be a quiet boardroom negotiation to a full-blown public corporate brawl in what feels like record time.
It happens so.
WBD, under its CEO David Zaslav, at first they went into what looked like friendly one-on-one negotiations with the streaming behemoth Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Led by Ted Sarandos. It was a huge deal, pegged initially at around $72 billion. That was sort of the polite way to do things.
That was the clean, predictable path. But this is where the sources tell us the real drama start. Because the rival Paramount Skydance group, they were immediately not having any of that.
Right.
They saw the value in WBD, felt like they were being frozen out of the deal, and they responded with pure aggression. They launched a hostile overture, which means they completely bypassed WBD management. They went straight to the shareholders with a dramatically higher offer.
A move that just instantly signaled their intent and completely forced WBD's hand.
Right.
That initial hostile bid from the Paramount Skydance merger group was valued at $108.4 billion, whole company.
$108 billion.
That is nearly $36 billion more than what Netflix had on the table. It just immediately elevated the stakes far beyond those quieter initial talk.
And that kind of move, a hostile takeover, it tells you everything you need to know about this story. The sources confirm that the leadership over at Paramount Skydance, particularly David Ellison, CEO of Skydance, he doesn't like to lose.
Clearly.
A hostile takeover is, it's the most aggressive move in the corporate playbook. It's a mechanism that's designed to use the shareholders to force a deal through, even if the board or the management prefers another partner. It's just a calculated, high-stakes fight playing out in public, signaling that Ellison and his partners are serious about winning, no matter whose feathers they ruffle.
Okay, so to really get why WBD is suddenly the most prized asset in all of media, we absolutely have to talk about the man who orchestrated this whole situation.
Yeah.
WBD's CEO, David Zaslav. He's either the architect of all this chaos or the architect of this incredible success, depending on how you look at it.
Zaslav's role is the critical piece of context here. He was brought into the merged company. He came from the Discovery side with one very specific, very difficult job.
Right.
Slash the inherited debt and just brutally streamline the operations. And we're talking about a debt load that was in tens of billions of dollars. He had a reputation for being fiscally ruthless, and, well, he did not disappoint.
And his execution of that was, it was painful for Hollywood to watch. We saw these high-profile projects getting canceled, which generated massive headlines and just infuriated the entire creative community. The most famous example, of course, was Batgirl, a completely finished film, just shelved, destroyed, not for creative reasons, but purely for a tax write-off.
And this is where we should probably get into the technical mechanics for a second. The Batgirl cancellation wasn't just simple cost-cutting. It was a highly specific accounting move.
Right, it was strategic.
It was very strategic. Zaslav was capitalizing on this unique opportunity that was related to the merger, the ability to take a tax loss against the value of the company they had just acquired. So by destroying the finished product, they could recognize that cost immediately as a loss, which significantly offset other merger-related losses, and crucially, it cleaned up the balance sheet. It made the whole company look leaner and much more attractive to a potential buyer.
That is the essential insight. He wasn't just burning things, he was maximizing the tax advantage to prepare the company for this exact moment. And we also have to remember Coyote versus Acme. That became another global symbol of the Zaslav regime's cost-cutting, and it generated a massive outcry.
That's right. And while the sources do note that Coyote versus Acme was eventually licensed out, so it wasn't just left to rot in a vault like Batgirl, the message that sent to Hollywood was absolutely chilling.
Yeah.
It was that creative value was secondary to financial strategy. If a project didn't align with the new lean debt reduction plan, it was gone, regardless of the talent involved or, the quality of the finished film.
So he performs this surgical removal of debt and unwanted assets.
Huh.
And this leads directly to that fantastic, almost cinematic analogy we found in the source material, that Zaslav, right now, is acting like an evil girl in a rom-com.
It's a perfect comparison for the market perception. I mean, just last year, WBD was struggling. It was seen as down and out and not worth the money. Its stock was depressed. The debt was immense, and creative morale was probably at an all-time low.
Absolutely rock bottom.
And then Zaslav comes in, performs this necessary, deeply unpopular surgery, pares down the debt, and now he has engineered this stunning bidding war where you have David Ellison from Paramount Skydance and Ted Sarandos from Netflix literally fighting over the company he reformed. He cleaned up the house, put a massive premium price tag on it, and now two giants are duking it out on the front lawn for everyone to see. It's a spectacular turnaround in market perception, and it's driven entirely by that ruthless financial streamlining.
His moves, which were so heavily criticized at the time for being anti-creative, turned out to be highly strategic in preparing WBD to be acquired at its absolute maximum value.
The precision of his timing is really, he has created a high-value, competitive bidding scenario that forces both parties to continually raise the stake and, sweeten their offers. And this whole saga is just hurtling toward a critical pre-holiday.
Yeah, that deadline is looming large. The tension is building right up to the end of the year. The WBD boardroom is slated to provide a formal answer to that aggressive Paramount Skydance pitch on December 22nd.
And that date is the pivot point. It's when the board has to officially respond to the hostile overture from the Ellison. So until then, both Netflix and the Paramount Skydance Group are playing hardball, trying to win over not just the board, but the individual shareholders who are the decision. They will determine the company's fate. The silence from WBD management after that hostile bid only makes the tension higher.
Let's pivot now to the heart of the action, the battle itself. We need to dive into the two major contenders, the immense amount of cash they're throwing around, and the specific, very different strategies they're using to win over those shareholders. So let's start with contender number one, the incumbent Netflix, led by CEO Ted Sarandos.
Netflix had the advantage of being the initial dance partner, which gave them a head start in negotiation diligence. Their proposed acquisition of WBD was initially valued at $72 billion.
Okay.
And they put forward an offer to WBD shareholders of $30.75 per share.
And the structure of that $30.75 offer is absolutely crucial here.
Yeah.
It was offered in both cash and stock, which means shareholders would get some immediate money, but also shares in the new merged company.
And that distinction between cash and stock is the single most important differentiating factor in this whole fight, because that is what the hostile bidder, Paramount Skydance, immediately and very strategically seized upon.
Right.
They understand that while $30.75 sounds higher, that stock component introduces what is, for many shareholders, an unacceptable level of risk.
Precise. So let's look at contender two, Paramount Skydance. This group isn't just some loose collection of investors. It's a focused merger team that was put together over the summer specifically for acquisitions like this. It's spearheaded by David and Larry Ellison, the heirs to the Oracle fortune, which gives them immense financial backing and a mandate for aggression.
And they have key, credible parts. Their team includes Redbird Capital, which is run by the highly respected media dealmaker, Jerry Cardell. Cardell's involvement provides immediate legitimacy and it shows that this isn't just raw Ellison, it's a sophisticated professional attempt at corporate.
So they come in with that opening aggressive hostile bid valued at $108.4 billion for the entire company. But like we said, their primary counterargument to Netflix wasn't initially about the final number. It was all about the structure of the payment and reducing shareholder risk.
This is the core of their strategy. Paramount argued that their initial $30 per share offer, which was technically a little lower than Netflix's headline figure, was ultimately superior because the Paramount offer was all cash.
Okay, so let's pause and really unpack that. Why would a shareholder take $30 in guaranteed cash today over a deal that's supposedly worth $30.75 but includes stock?
Because stock offers introduce volatility and risk, especially in a merger. When a major acquisition gets announced, the acquiring company's stock, so in this case Netflix, it often dips because investors worry about the costs and the challenge integration. So if the Netflix stock drops by just a few percentage points after the deal is finalized, that extra 75 cents of value in the stock component VAP. An all-cash offer, however, is guaranteed money in the bank. It removes the market risk completely, which is extremely attractive to major investors. Next.
So Paramount Skydance is basically offering insulation against any post-merger market shock. And because they are clearly on a warpath, the sources confirm they're ready to sweeten the pot even more to make the decision financially unavoidable. They're considering raising their takeover offer by as much as 10%, potentially bumping that all-cash offer up to $33 a share.
That is a critical move.
Yep.
And let's look at the financial specifics here from the source material. This raised offer, if it happens, would amount to nearly $86 billion in equity value. But crucially, that figure includes the strategic step of assuming WBD's significant outstanding debt load.
Right.
So Zaslav worked tirelessly to reduce that debt, but the Ellisons are showing they have the capital capacity to absorb what's left.
And here's the detail that shows their absolute determination to break the existing Netflix deal. This raised $86 billion offer would easily cover the significant $2.8 billion breakup fee that WBD would legally owe Netflix if they walk away.
To put that in perspective for a shareholder, that breakup fee is worth about $1 a share. So Paramount Skydance is basically building in the capacity to absorb that cost completely and still offer an excellent premium. They're telling the WBD board, we will make this painless, risk-free, and profitable for you, even if you breach your initial.
And they're not just stopping at the formal offer either. The Ellisons are actively, almost aggressively, courting the shareholder. The sources note they're reportedly willing to add a sweep of at least $2 a share on top of their formal $33 offer to seal the deal. This is a direct, public attempt to bypass the board and directly incentivize the individual owners of the company.
That's why the sources say the Ellisons are clearly not going to be jerked around. They launched this massive hostile bid, felt that Zaslav was ignoring them, which we can circle back to with that whole jilted CEO narrative.
Yeah, right.
And now they're deploying every financial lever possible to show they have the muscle and the determination to close whatever it costs. They're communicating directly to the market that they are in.
However, we absolutely have to address the elephant in the room with the Paramount bid, where the money is coming from.
Indeed. The sources describe the funding for the Paramount bid as already dicey, and it involves what the materials call endless seed fund from highly controversial and potentially politically compromised partners in the Middle East.
Specifically, the sources mention substantial funding coming from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and from associates linked to Jared Kushner. This raises massive questions about transparency, political influence, and just the geopolitical risk of who will ultimately control the bastion of American enterprise.
And this financial dependency introduces a completely separate dimension of regulatory political. When foreign entities, especially those linked to sovereign wealth funds like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, seek to acquire significant American media assets, it automatically triggers a high level of scrutiny.
CFIUS, that's the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States.
Exactly. So even though the all-cash offer is attractive to shareholders, the complexity of its funding and the geopolitical baggage that comes with it introduces a major risk that regulators might see it as a national security issue, or at least a political one, which could delay or even torpedo the deal entirely.
It makes Netflix's relatively cleaner, domestically financed offer look, well, structurally more appealing, despite the risks of the stock component and the antitrust flag. But at the end of the day, for individual shareholders, the immediate question is still, who puts the most guaranteed cash on the table? And right now, the Ellisons are trying to make that decision unavoidable. Let's transition now to maybe the thorniest part of this whole deep dive, the regulatory gauntlet. You can forget the boardroom battles and the cash offers for a second. Even if WBD accepts a bid, the ultimate deciding body is the U.S. government, specifically the Justice Department and the Federal Trade Commission.
This is the core issue facing both deals, but it is a potentially fatal flaw for the net. The sources all highlight that the central regulatory problem is the accelerated consolidation of the U.S. subscription video on demand market, the SVOD market.
And when you look at the industry structure, the problem becomes immediately obvious. Netflix is the undisputed #1 streaming service, globally and domestic. WBD, through its Max platform, is ranked #3.
Right.
Combining the #1 and #3 players in an already consolidating market just screams government intervention under existing antitrust law.
The risk there stems from the concept of horizontal integration. This means merging two companies that operate in the same competitive space, in this case, streaming. If the two biggest competitors merge, the government's argument is that consumers lose choice and the merged company gains undue pricing power. This is why Netflix's proposal has sparked such a tough response from key members of Congress.
The sources specifically cite Senator Elizabeth Warren as being on the warpath about this proposed merger. Her position is focused entirely on market dominance and protecting consumer choice from monopolistic control.
That is an immense headwind for Ted Sarandos. Congressional opposition often translates into regulatory delay and demands for significant structural remedies. These remedies could include forcing the merged company to divest certain assets like the news networks, or maybe forcing licensing agreements just to ensure content remains broadly available.
Okay, now contrast that with the Paramount antitrust argument. A lot of people in the industry believe that a sale to Paramount Skydance would face less of a problem. And the sources give a clear reason for this, and it's all about the types of media assets involved.
This is where the concept of vertical integration plays. Paramount is CBS, a traditional broadcast network. WBD owns CNN, which is a prominent cable station, plus assets like HBO, TBS, and...
So if Paramount buys WBD, they're essentially consolidating different parts of the media pipeline network, cable, and then streaming with Max and the smaller Paramount Plus. They're integrating down the chain or across different distribution types rather than just merging two top streaming.
And the argument is that since they're consolidating distinct types of media assets, the resulting company doesn't pose the same direct threat of a monopoly in the pure streaming market like the Netflix. It's seen as a more diversified combination, potentially enhancing the distribution of Paramount's existing content rather than a pure power grab for streaming dominance.
But even with that potentially cleaner antitrust argument, Paramount still faces obstacles, especially with the foreign funding we talked. And neither side can ignore the direct legal challenges that are already happening. We've got a highly significant class action lawsuit filed by an individual.
Yeah, the lawsuit from Michelle Fenlander, an HBO Max subscriber based in Las Vegas. This case is remarkable because Fenlander has never been a Netflix subscriber, yet she's suing to block the deal based purely on principle. Wow.
The lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court in San Jose.
And the basis of her lawsuit cuts right to the heart of the regulatory issue in a way that, really resonates with consumers. It argues the deal threatens to reduce competition in the SVOD market and seeks an injunction to block the acquisition entirely, arguing the combined company would inevitably raise prices and reduce content quality.
This signals that opposition is coming not just from political figures worried about abstract market dynamics, but directly from the consumer level, using existing antitrust law. The core argument is that if Netflix takes control of WBD's immense exclusive content library, everything from Game of Thrones and Harry Potter to the DC Universe, it drastically reduces choice for the average person and creates a near monopoly on highly desirable exclusive content that no other streamer can replicate.
And as if Congress, civil lawsuits, and CFIUS concerns weren't enough, we also have to factor in blatant political meddling, specifically from former President Donald Trump, who has inserted himself into this conversation as a powerful outside actor. The sources confirm he met with Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos in early November. And while the conversation was probably framed as a private business discussion, the public commentary that followed made it clear that his key interest lies with one specific CNN,
which he calls a very dishonest group of people. His demands regarding the sale of a private company are explicit and highly unusual. He argued that any deal should be guaranteed and certain that CNN is part of it or sold separately, ensuring its ownership is addressed no matter who buys the rest.
And even more controversially, he specifically said that the current CNN leadership should not be allowed to continue running the company, which moves the discussion far beyond just regulatory oversight and into direct commentary on the personnel running it. This raises major concerns about potential political interference in the decisions of future media owners, which is a huge factor for any buyer, especially Netflix, given the political pressure they are.
But his meddling wasn't limited to Netflix. He also expressed clear annoyance with Paramount, specifically over an interview they did with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, arguing the current Paramount leadership is no better than the old leadership.
This whole thread just highlights how intensely politically charged the media ownership landscape has become. When you're dealing with companies that own vital news networks, CNN for WBD, CBS for Paramount, the transaction becomes a direct target for political actors looking to leverage their influence over content distribution and journalistic independence. The stakes are immensely higher than just calculating the value of the next Barbie.
Moving on, we really need to look at how the other industry heavyweights rights, the competitors, are watching this battle unfold. And the most interesting and perhaps the most hypocritical reaction of all comes from the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger.
Oh, the irony is just overwhelming here. Bob Iger is, by all accounts, the greatest corporate consolidator of the modern era. He built the Disney empire we know today through a relentless series of multi-billion-dollar acquisitions: Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, Hulu, and the gigantic landscape-shifting purchase of 21st Century Fox.
Right.
Yet, the sources confirm Iger is now voicing strong concerns about the Netflix-WBD combination.
The guy who literally consolidated half of Hollywood is now telling regulators to pump the brakes on his competitors' consolidation.
Okay.
I mean, it would be hilarious if his points weren't so strategically important. We have to analyze his argument, regardless of the obvious conflict of interest.
His core concern centers on two specific consumer-facing areas. The first is pricing power. Iger stated that regulators have to look closely at the impact on the consumer, specifically if one company, meaning Netflix, would end up with pricing leverage that might be negative or damaging to the consumer.
And he justifies this by pointing to Netflix's sheer scale, their significant amount of streaming subscriptions across the world. If they also manage to own the WBD library, their control over must-have content becomes so total that they possess unprecedented leverage to just increase prices constantly, knowing that consumers have virtually nowhere else to go for that combined portfolio of IP.
And this ties directly back to our central thesis. IP is king. When you own the desired content, the sequels, the cinematic universes, the legacy franchises, you own the pricing power. And Iger knows this better than anyone because it's the exact strategy that allowed Disney Plus to grow so rapidly and command a premium price after the Fox acquisition.
But Iger's concerns didn't stop with subscription price. He also highlighted the potentially devastating negative impacts of this consolidation on the creative community and, crucially, on the ecosystem of traditional theatrical distribution.
This is where his historical experience running a major film studio really informs his argument. He emphasized the fragility and the importance of the motion picture and movie theater business. These theaters all over the world, they operate with relatively thin margins. They require massive volume and sustained, committed interaction with movie monetized success throughout the year.
That sustained partnership is essential for the entire value. So if a massive, purely streaming entity like Netflix acquires WBD, one of the last major studios committed to the theatrical model, the fear among creatives and theater owners is that Netflix will systematically dismantle and cut down the critical theatrical window.
The traditional theatrical window used to be around 90 days. It was a guaranteed period of exclusivity for cinemas before a film hit home video. The sources captured the fear perfectly when discussing how this window might evolve under Netflix, suggesting it will become 15 days to slow the spread of good.
That is an incredibly vivid and dark prediction. It implies that successful films will just be dumped onto streaming after a mere 2 weeks, completely undermining the profitability, the stability, and the cultural experience of the theater ecosystem Iger described. Why would you spend the money to go to the cinema if you know it'll be on your living room screen in 15 days?
The ultimate creative complaint is simple, and it's unified. Media consolidation sucks because it is demonstrably bad for creatives. It results in immediate cuts to jobs, massive layoffs, and severely reduces the ability of studios to produce diverse work that might not be instantly IP. They worry about the loss of creative autonomy under a purely cost-driven streaming model.
This fear is so acute that one source used the vivid, if maybe cynical phrase, terminal Ellison derangement syndrome to describe the deep skepticism many in the creative community have toward any new owner. They fear consolidation no matter who wins.
Indeed. They fear the Netflix model, which prioritizes immediate streaming content and subscription retention over the traditional theatrical or broadcast model. But this leads to an interesting nuanced contrast in potential consumer preference. Our source suggests that if WBD has to be sold, Paramount might paradoxically be more consumer-friendly than Netflix.
Why is that?
Yeah.
Given that consolidation is generally seen as negative, why might a traditional media company like Paramount be preferred over the streaming pioneer?
That preference likely stems from the belief that Paramount, with its traditional broadcast network and legacy studio roots, would be more inclined to honor the existing distribution windows, respect the theatrical ecosystem, and potentially maintain a diversity of output.
Mm-hmm.
Netflix, being a purely streaming first and views theatrical release as a marketing tool to drive subscription, and that approach is widely feared to be destructive.
And that raises a profound cultural question about the future. If Netflix buys WBD, will they honor the incredible 100-year legacy of Warner Bros? We can look at Iger's own history for the best predictive answer. The source asks if Netflix would handle WBD the way Disney handled 21st Century Fox, where those films and studios became an afterthought, or what the source bluntly called slop.
The fear is total homogenization and the erasure of distinct studio voices. Disney bought Fox and systematically streamlined their output to fit the established Disney brand, diminishing the unique voice and creative autonomy of the Fox studios, especially in areas like smaller dramas or adult comedy. Creatives fear Netflix would do the same, acquiring WBD's IP only to feed the streaming beast, resulting in deep job cuts and a diminished focus on complex, non-franchise projects like high-end HBO drama, which are essential to WBD's brand.
So as this complex battle rages on across finance, regulation, and Hollywood, it's really instructive to look at how the market is placing its bets. We can get a fascinating real-time snapshot of investor and public confidence by checking the betting market odds on Polymarket.
The data is a reflection of perceived leverage and risk. Paramount's hostile $108 billion bid, fueled by that all-cash component and their aggressive strategy, has given them a distinct. It's placed them as the current favored party, despite the geopolitical fund.
The odds give Paramount Skydance a 42% chance successfully closing the WB acquisition. Netflix is close behind, but trailing at 30. And the possibility of no deal, meaning Zaslav fends off both suitors or some other alternative emerges, is listed at 9.
Those numbers confirm that the hostile bid was exceptionally effective in shifting market sentiment away. It shows that investors see the all-cash offer and the aggressiveness of the Ellison as a significant factor that outweighs the initial momentum, particularly in a volatile market where shareholders...
And speaking of Netflix's financial muscle, there is a fantastic, ironic comment highlighted in the source material that perfectly connects their financial capacity to a perennial consumer.
Oh yeah, the comment. Netflix had enough cash to buy Warner Brothers, but cried poor when we shared passwords with our moms.
It's cynical, but it's highly relevant to how this deal is financed. Netflix made a massive, unpopular, and highly effective move over the last couple of years, enforcing password sharing restrictions and instituting regular price increase. That move generated billions in fresh disposable capital.
And that capital is precisely how they accumulated the cash reserves necessary, $72 billion worth, to fund a colossal act. The massive profits generated from those stricter policies, which annoyed countless users globally, are now being leveraged for market dominance. It directly connects consumer action or annoyance to high-level M&A strategy.
It is the cycle of consolidation. Consumers fund the war chest through higher fees and stricter rules, and then that war chest is used to buy up rivals, potentially leading to even higher fees and fewer choices down the road.
Absolutely. And on the flip side of this, we have the immense human drama of the hostile bid, which was fueled by a corporate slight.
That's the jilted CEO narrative we mentioned earlier. The sources detail the insider rumor that the Ellisons were genuinely pissed at Zaslav's initial non-response to their superior offer. Zaslav essentially left him on red, the corporate world equivalent of being completely ghosted after declaring interest.
And how did the Skydance Group respond to being ignored? They did not send a polite memo. They went public and put out what the sources call a snarky website that meticulously outlined their all-cash offer and aggressively argued why it was structurally superior and less risky than Netflix's complex stock and cash proposal.
That move, creating a dedicated, aggressive marketing site, is a perfect illustration of how personal these corporate battles become when a hostile bid is launched. It wasn't just a financial decision. It was a deliberate move to shame Zaslav, bypass the board, force his hand, and demand immediate attention. It demonstrated that the Ellisons are willing to use public pressure and direct shareholder appeals to win a deal when they feel they've been slighted. So what does this entire saga mean for you, the learner, as we wrap up this deep dive? We have David Zaslav, who successfully engineered a fierce, high-stakes battle for his company by focusing on debt reduction and financial stream. We have David Ellison leading the aggressive, all-cash hostile bid from Paramount Skydance, armed with a powerful financial structure, but saddled with controversial foreign seed money. And then we have Ted Sarandos leading Netflix, armed with a cleaner, but potentially more regulation-prone stock and cash offer.
The dynamic is crystal clear. The battle for the immense assets of Warner Bros. Discovery is raging simultaneously in the boardroom, in the financial markets, in Congress, in federal court, and on the geopolitical. Every single facet of this deal is being contested, scrutinized, and politicized up to that crucial December 22nd.
But if we zoom out to the final provocative thought raised by the source material, the biggest implication of this $108 billion battle all comes back to a single fundamental truth in modern media. IP is king.
Despite all the talk of mergers, antitrust, and competition, what truly dictates the financial outcome is consumer demand for known franchises and guarantees. The source mentions, quite vividly, a theoretical example like Zootopia 2 generating $1 billion.
Consumers may complain endlessly about high prices or repetitive content, but they overwhelmingly show up for the slop, as the source vividly calls the guaranteed, predictable revenue generated by IP they already know and love. This immense, relentless consumer demand for franchises gives these media companies unprecedented leverage.
That leverage allows them to increase prices constantly and, as Bob Iger feared, cut theatrical windows down to unsustainable length. So the fundamental question for you, the learner, is this. In an era where IP leverage allows consolidation to drive billions upon billions in guaranteed revenue, can any regulatory body truly prioritize consumer health, meaning lower prices, wider content diversity, and maintain theatrical windows over the relentless corporate desire to own the slop that guarantees endless profit, regardless of the consequences for the industry structure.
It's the $108 billion question that will determine how you consume media for the next decade. Whether it's Paramount or Netflix that prevails, the winner takes control of a cultural behemoth, and the resulting entity will have unprecedented power over both what you watch and how much you pay to watch. That was a deep dive.
Thank you for joining us for this crucial analysis.
We'll catch you next time.